Good morning. Welcome to the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Policy Board meeting, May 16, 2025. We'll call it to order and roll call.
District Director Boatright. Here. Councilmember Menino for Councilmember Cotton.
Here.
Commissioner Carol Ann Felts. Councilmember Harding.
Here.
Mr. Awad for Councilmember Hurtak.
Here.
Commissioner Mariano.
Here.
Mr. McGill.
Here.
Mr. Glicksberg for Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Peters.
Here.
Governing Board Member Watkins.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. All right. First order of business, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay. Approval for the minutes of the February 14th meeting. Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And for general public comments, we have a Golden Mangrove Award presentation.
Yeah, first up, we have both Jan Allen and Marjorie Karvarnen from the Community Advisory Committee presenting the award for the 2024 Golden Mangrove Award for Bay Mini Grants that exemplify both exemplary actions towards community restoration efforts, as well as educating the community on further protecting and restoring Tampa Bay. So we'll give some short presentations on the two projects that were considered for the Golden Mangrove Award this year.
All right.
Over to you guys.
Good morning. I'm Jan Allen and this is Marjorie Karvarnen. And we're both members of the Community Advisory Committee. We had a hard time deciding who to give the Golden Mangrove Award to this year. And so fortunately, the estuary program allowed us to split the baby in half and give two. So we're very happy about that because we thought that both projects were very deserving. They have a lot of things in common. They were both very ambitious. They were both multifaceted. They combined restoration with education. They engaged many volunteers and they'll have a continuing effect. They're ongoing projects. It's not a one and done thing, which is really important because they will have continuing impact on the Tampa Bay Estuary's watershed. We're going to do one and then the other. Is that
Sure.
Okay? So
And flipping through.
am I supposed to keep up with this or just gonna roll? Okay.
It's just, don't worry about
All right. So Keep Pinellas Beautiful's project was High Point Restoration, High Point Environmental Education and Restoration. And the things that impressed us about them. And first of all, I was surprised, some community members weren't, Marjorie wasn't, but I was surprised we had not given the Golden Mangrove to Keep Pinellas Beautiful before, because they have been such an active and important partner to the estuary program, and they have done so many good projects. This one was exceptional, partly because the estuary program provided pretty much all the funding other than the match, which was mostly volunteer match. It was notable because it involved 5 different community stakeholders. And it was a multifaceted project. It had a trash hotline, community cleanups, an adoption program, invasive plant removal, educational presentations. Oh, and they did 14 community cleanups and adoption cleanups. The educational presentations, they did 5 for teens at the High Point Youth Empowerment Center. So it was involving youth, which is great. That's in itself is an ongoing effect, I think. They planted native vegetation and edible landscaping at the High Point Family Center. So it was just a great project all around, and we were very impressed. So congratulations to Keep Pinellas Beautiful. And here representing Keep Pinellas Beautiful are Pat DeFlasco, Stephanie Ellington Lawler, and Megan Jackson.
There you go. Just don't get the foot. Okay. Carly, can you wait until we get board members in the photo too? That would be awesome.
Yeah, we're gonna ask the full board to get in the pictures too.
We have one other one to present too.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Show up one day and I'm.
We get a second row of people,
Yeah,
so let's
move
move
in.
in. You know, any of the award winners in the front row.
Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
then
Walk in, can I get you in the center? And Marjorie, can I get you in the front row? And then everybody between two rows. Between two rows.
We're cleaned up. Yes. Cleaned up. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is very much.
Okay, and our second Golden Mangrove winner is also extremely impressive. Vista Gardens did a woodland restoration at their place in Ellsworth County. They restored 12,000 square feet. It was restored and or improved the area in a cypress swamp and then surrounding the cypress swamp. They installed an enormous number of plants, 557 native plants, including 93 different species. So they really increased the biodiversity of the area. They hosted 25 volunteer events, including workdays, tours, hosted school field trips, and a composting talk. And they removed 155 cubic yards of invasive plants. They also introduced potato leaf beetles as a biological control for any remaining air potato or stuff that would grow back. And they produced a really beautiful field guide for the restoration area with profiles of a lot of the plants that they added, so that they can use that for continuing education at Vista. It was just really a great project. I was very impressed. And I'm hoping to take our native plant chapter there for a tour sometime in the near future, because I just thought it was so great. For Vista, we have Vista President Jennifer Grebenshikoff. Is that close?
It out when I get up.
Okay, good. Vicky Hughes, Vista Native Habitat Chair, Trong Vu, USF Rotaract Project Chair, and Angela Ada-Arba, USF Rotaract Service Chair. So, congratulations to all of you. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful project.
I have some. I was invited to make some comments, not a presentation. So we thank you for this very special award. We're all here so honored to have this recognition of what became this huge transformation of the wetlands that many of us didn't even know that we had at Vista Gardens. So special recognition goes to Elizabeth Warner. She is the chair of the Woodland Committee. She's not able to be with us today because she had an option to go to Greece or come here. So you know how that works, right? It was Elizabeth, however, who spearheaded the entire project. She shepherded the grant process, the deliverables, and she continues with her committee members to ensure that our woodland area is free of those nasty invasive Brazilian pepper bush, the camphor tree, the Caesar weed plants, to name just a few. And the many, many newly planted native plants that are now succeeding in their homes. Vicki Cusey, right here, is our master gardener and chair of our Native Habitats Committee. And Vicki is a huge advocate of native plants and habitats for wildlife, especially butterflies and bees. She led the process of selecting and planting the native plantings in our woodland area, and under her guidance, her leadership, the plants are thriving, requiring very little maintenance. We're also very pleased today to have Trong Vo with us and Angela Ada-Arba. They are the leaders of the USF Rotaract Club, University of South Florida. And their Rotaract is the college branch of Rotary International. Rotaract members are students who try to make the community a better place. And they've been working with Vista in our woodland and our garden areas since 2018 on various projects. And this school year, they removed most, if not all, of those invasive trees and shrubs in the woodland. I think they best liked the idea of some of that heavy equipment that they had to use. Those students did the lion's share of the heavy labor in the restoration project. We couldn't have done it without your hard work and dedication, so thank you. So Vista Gardens thanks our members, our community volunteers for all the dedication, all the commitment, all the energy on this really, really specially successful project. And we especially thank Tampa Bay Estuary Program's mini grant program for the resources and the support that allowed us to contribute to an appreciation and restoration of Vista's woodlands as a living laboratory. Thank you.
Won an award, you're in the front.
Yeah. Not see everybody's faces. So
Nancy,
somebody
can you come over here?
here.
Marjorie, can you come in front of Commissioner Mariano? Thank you.
He loves the spotlight.
There you go. There you go.
And move over a tiny bit more.
You're doing great, everybody. You all look
Thanks.
beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
I know we all been.
That or frightened?
Little about.
Yeah.
Just stay until I get frightened.
So I just want to add, just goes to show a little bit of money goes a long way. For those new board members that don't know, the Bay Mini Grant program is funded entirely through the sales of our specialty license plate, the Target tag. So we're going to be checking the parking lot after the meeting, make sure everyone has a Target tag on their vehicle. Those funds go directly to the community for these type of projects that, educate the community and get them involved with the restoration of the Tampa Bay Estuary.
And the application period is open right now.
Great work. We'll go to number 4, quarterly financial report. Mr. Shelley.
Yeah, on page 8 of the agenda packet is our quarterly financials, basically the half year of our activity, both revenues and expenditures for our program. On page 8, like I said, we look at that furthest most column on the right to see where we're at in terms of the pacing according to the budget we passed last August. Look at trying to be at about 50% on both revenues and expenditures there based on projections that we developed last year. You see, we're a little bit behind in terms of both revenues and expenses, and that's just the pace of projects being implemented. Isn't to say that we were not going to reach those sort of budgeted totals, but a lot of that funding will probably roll into the next fiscal year as those projects are fully implemented. I have a couple of footnotes on the report. We did receive some additional state funding to support establishment of a real-time monitoring station in Bishop's Harbor. That was sort of new money that was coming into the program that we didn't plan for last August. So I'm just making a footnote there. And then on the expense side, footnotes 2 and 3 just relate to expenses that we didn't plan for last August. Capital outlays and small equipment were just additional laptop purchases that we had to form for 2 employees because we had some failures with existing computers. So we had to purchase 2 new laptops there. And then the volunteer services, again, this is sort of good news. We received an additional grant from the Regional Planning Council to provide some incentives to stakeholders to help out with stormwater messaging campaign that we received a grant for through the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. So we're a little bit over in terms of volunteer services, and we'll make those adjustments in the next agenda item as it relates to our mid-year budget amendment. But overall, like I said, we're about 1.5 million total revenues for the year and about 1.3 million in expenses through the end of March 31st. Be happy to answer any questions if you had any on the quarterly financials.
Tell us about the 75,000 from the state. Is that a normal revenue stream, or is that something new or different, or one time, or something we can pursue?
It was one time, and it was stemming from a settlement agreement between third parties and the state regarding a Piney Point facility. So there's additional monitoring that the third party was asking the state to perform. The state provided that seed funding to establish a real-time station in Bishop Harbor just a month after the final closure of that facility. We're working with USF right now to establish a new real-time station that would integrate into an existing network they're maintaining.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions? I want to bring up one thought. You just mentioned messaging, and we just had our hurricane preparedness meeting at the board of the county commission of Pasco County. And we talked about different things. And one of the things I brought up was we had a agreement several years ago with billboards that were like hard and fast. And we kind of did a change out for a 4-to-1 ratio or 6-to-1 ratio, depending exactly where we landed. And I brought up that maybe we should look at trying to do another conversion agreement with them. Because if you have an electronic board, when you have a storm situation, they can put the message out real clear, real loud, and they build into their whole agreements with us to do that. So we're going to revisit it, talk about it at the workshop, and can't make a motion there, but it's definitely was, our fire chief was 100% behind it, and our communications people behind it. So it's something we're going to look at doing. You guys might want to consider the same thing. We may all be negotiating with the same people anyways as it comes about, and maybe even coordinate the message, because it's going to hit any part of this region. It's going to affect all of us.
Yeah, and this is an initiative that Dr. Blake Simmons is working on specifically for stormwater messaging and identifying what messages might resonate best with residents throughout the region. We are also investing in billboards related to B-Flirty, and if there's opportunities to leverage with other partners in the region on reducing the cost for different campaigns, we'd be happy to entertain that.
I think, you know, like I said, the great thing is with Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Pasco, with our commissions now meeting together, with administrators getting so well along. And we talked extensively, we just had a tri-county meeting about this type of subject. So maybe this is a great subject to reach out to our administrators, have them kind of bring that together and say, let's go look at this together. Because I think if we all do it, it's all one message. You know, when storm surge is going to be 6, 7, 8 feet, and they see it up and down the coast, I think it might resonate a little bit more than just seeing a little billboard here, a little even flashing sign, or even just like little things on your website. But it's something I think we definitely want to look at. So I think I'll reach out to my administrator, and you guys want to do the same to yours in the counties, then it might be helpful.
We know it's certainly not cheap to advertise on those digital billboards. So anyway, we can stretch dollars across the region.
They actually set it up where it's actually a public service awareness announcement that they do and doesn't charge you for it. So all the cost would be, if you set it up,
Okay.
would just be to do the promotion as you go forward. And we've already got that built in the ones we have set up. So I just want to increase the number to try to make it even better on the reservation.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, so we need a motion to accept the report.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay. And 2025 mid-year budget amendment.
Yeah, so on page 10 of your packet is our proposal for budget adjustments to that budget that we passed last August based on our activities through the first half of this year, and which you just accepted. So like I said, we're adjusting down some of our expectations in terms of overall revenues and expenditures based on the pace of projects being implemented this year, and will likely roll into the next fiscal year. So you'll see some minor adjustments down in terms of revenues, about 10% of what we reduction down from what we expected at the start of this fiscal year 2025. And then on the expenditure side, we're looking at ratcheting down by about 13%. That's primarily, again, our technical and comms contracts. The expected sort of delivery of each of those deliverables will probably be pushed into the next fiscal year. So we made about a $500,000 adjustment down of our expectations based on the August budget of last year. Other minor adjustments that I kind of just talked about relative to capital outlays and small equipment. This is just tapping into existing grant resources and just acknowledging some of the expenses that I just referenced in the last report. And then ratcheting down again, some postage, mass mailing expenses as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on those mid-year budget amendments. This just allows us to bring sort of the final budget that we adopt in November a little bit closer to what our expectations are based on, like I said, the pace of both revenues and expenditures through the first half of this year. So this is a totally optional agenda item, but we typically do this at the May board meeting.
It's a good process. Any comments, questions?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Aye. Thank you. Now for the work plan.
Yeah, as we typically do at this May board meeting, we also try to finalize our EPA annual work plan and budget, which is our grant application to EPA for any congressionally appropriated dollars through the national SHA programs that flow through EPA. We presented a draft of this plan back at the February board meeting, and it's largely remained unchanged. Luckily, there was a continuing resolution passed through Congress and signed by President that level funds our program at least through fiscal year 2026. There are some caveats to that sort of conversation happening right now in DC. There's chances that both OMB and the federal agencies might decide on a different budget number than was adopted in the continued resolution through what's called rescission. We haven't heard that this is going to affect the national SHA programs or appropriations to each of the national SHA programs, but there is still that chance before that's basically fully adopted at the federal level. So all that being said, we're remaining optimistic that we can plan for about $850,000 in Section 320 Clean Water Act funds flowing through EPA to our program that we match with about $663,000 of local funds through our interlocal agreement. And then to make up any differences, because this is a 50-50 cost share grant agreement with EPA, we usually identify an in-kind project to make up the gap. So in total, we're able to fund about $1.7 million worth of projects, which covers the majority of our operations, but it also allows for us to fund additional technical and community outreach projects that are identified on the agenda item there. There's about 5 projects to the tune of about $376,000 in our technical project components that we're looking to fund, and about $82,000 in communications and outreach projects. Also this year, and this will be under a separate agreement as part of the long-term implementation of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or we used to call this the bill funds. There's one remaining year of dollars coming to the national SHA programs that are also potentially subject to rescission, but we haven't heard them being rescinded as of yet. But there's about $909,000 of available funds for that last year of IIJA funding come to the NEPs. The 2 projects that were identified in the long-term plan that was adopted by this board a couple of years ago for these remaining year funds were the Hillsborough County Septic to Sewer Conversion Initiative, as well as the Coopers Point Tidal Circulation Master Plan with City of Clearwater. So we're looking to, again, apply for those funds to EPA for that final year of funding under a separate agreement. And this action is looking for approval of both our work plan and the application for this IIJA work plan, the 5th year of those funds to EPA. Once we receive approval, we'll turn around and submit those applications before June 1st, and then hopefully get a contract in place with EPA prior to the start of our fiscal year, which will begin October 1.
So you don't need match money for that?
No, there's no match required for those IIJA funds.
Okay, so if counties are doing septic to sewer programs, is there something that there's a partnership there to piggyback on, or?
Yep. We actually, the last year's of funding, we're supporting Pinellas County septic to sewer conversions.
Okay,
So
I don't know if other counties or cities are working on that, but I know Pinellas County has a lot of them.
St. Petersburg too, not through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, but through the Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund. We have a septic to sewer conversion program with them as well.
I just didn't know if you need a match or something to leverage for something.
No,
But Pinellas, I think we didn't have match to report at the last board meeting, but Pinellas County is providing the in-kind match for the work plan that's before you right now through a shoreline hardening project at Fort DeSoto and Bunce's Pass.
Actually, that was mentioned. I'm not sure when it was mentioned, but it was mentioned. So
Yeah,
that's what it is. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that-
I knew I heard that.
yeah, that's the match for our work plan dollars, that 850,000 that's coming to the program.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the board's support on the Cooper's Bayou project. Obviously, in Clearwater Challenge to our east and to our west on water hardening projects. And I greatly appreciate this board support. Is there a way that I can get information on the project timeline, anything like that? I'm sure Mr. Cotton has it, but if you don't
Yeah.
mind, I'd like to be a part of that as well.
Yeah, we've been working primarily with staff. There's a short write-up in the actual plan on what the project's supporting. I think these dollars are being targeted towards initial design and pre-permit applications for the project. And then there's probably going to be a need to find additional funds to actually implement the project from there.
Thank you, Chair. Ed, the federal government is different regardless of politics or thoughts on direction. Have you gotten any sense for what this industry will look like from how the feds are going to treat this industry over the next few years?
Yeah, I think, if we make it through fiscal year 2026 at these levels that I was just talking about, I'm expecting probably a ratcheting down of our budget from federal dollars coming to the program in fiscal year 2027 and beyond. We'll have to plan accordingly. I'm optimistic that we will continue to have bipartisan support for the National SU programs we always have. A lot of our local delegation has supported sign-on letters supporting our appropriations in the past. And that continues to today as well. All that being said, I'm expecting slight reductions in our budget beyond fiscal year 2026, and we just have to plan accordingly. What would happen at that point is, as I mentioned, majority of our operations are funded through our work plan, but we're also able to fund additional projects, about $500,000 in additional projects. So depending on the severity of the cuts, we'll probably look at sort of the core services that we could provide through our operations and probably cut the amount of project funding that we could support with future years of federal dollars. That's sort of the outlook right now until I get more information on what those long-term numbers might be. I could give you more information at that time.
Have you considered all the entities represented here have lobbyists at the state and federal level? Is that something that we've ever leveraged or asked to leverage?
Yeah, so we always educate our elected officials on the work that the SRE program has done. We
more
always
specifically.
encourage our partners to think about talking with the elected.
Let me ask the question better. Have we looked at designing a general war strategy that we could ask Pasco County, Pinellas County, the city of St. Pete, the city of Tampa, to include in their, if they would include in their plans I mean, we all employ lobbyists. We all have someone on staff who works directly with those lobbyists. We all have a plan for what those lobbyists are out to accomplish. And I don't know that this would work or work in all of the entities represented, but I wonder if it's worth looking at asking these lobbyists to include this in some way, shape, or fashion. I mean, I have to think when our local federal officials hear that it's important to the city of St. Pete, the city of Clearwater, and Pinellas County, it gets listened. And then at the Senate level, you've got a much bigger representation in this room. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think we're going to welcome those comments at a planning session that we're thinking about for the next board meeting. We're in August. We're planning on a joint meeting with the management board as well as the policy board to strategize sort of the next steps for our program over the next several years. It's also apropos because the interlocal agreement, which defines the shared funding that comes into the program that we match with those federal dollars, will have to be renewed by the end of fiscal year 2026 as well. So all those conversations, I think, at that August meeting would present a good opportunity of different strategies to practice done in the future.
I would also just remind everyone of the November board meeting meetings, we typically come to you all to help develop legislative priorities, and securing the full authorized funding level for the National Estuary Programs is always a top line priority for the federal elected officials. And our expectation, at least in the past, has been that you would take that information and share that with your respective lobbyists, and so that we could speak with one voice, so it has that talking point. If there is a need for, us to convene those groups or approach them differently, like, that's important feedback for us to know. But right now, we're relying on you all to take those priorities, those legislative priorities, and share those with your lobbyists and other relevant staff.
Thank you, Chair.
So, and I like the idea where you're going, and I don't think it's been included in our legislative agenda. So, like Tampa Bay Water will go around and give a presentation to every commission. Have you guys, because I don't remember you ever coming to our commission and giving a presentation about what it is you do. And if you were to go and do a presentation and let the rest of the commissioners and council members know what the estuary is doing, because sometimes we don't articulate it well to our boards. And then when you make those presentations, you can request what your top legislative priorities were and request that we include them in our legislative priorities. Now, sanitary to sewer is in our state priority, right, in our federal. So we have some of the projects in our priorities, but maybe not necessarily supporting the estuaries. But I think it would benefit the boards if you all came and did a presentation about what you've accomplished over the year, or what you've accomplished over the last 5 years, why the estuary program is so important. And then at the end of the presentation, make the ask to be included in the legislative priorities. And I just don't know if you've done that or do that or would consider doing that, but I don't think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I have presented at different boards in the past. Is actually last month that the EPC of Hillsborough County presented there. So I'd be happy to, if there's a certain window and timing that would be best.
Well,
to
I would
enter
say
into those
not during
conversations.
budget, because we just don't have the room on the agendas, but come the, and I can, and it's really up to us to put it on the legislative agenda. So I can work on putting what the priorities are on our legislative agenda. But I think after everyone's done with their first round of budget process, that's when the workshops would open up to be, have room on the agenda for you to present. But like I said, I think, St. Pete College will come and present once a year on what they're doing. Tampa Bay Water will present at least once a year. And maybe that's something that you all could consider.
Absolutely, we do. We also will be talking about the strategic plan at our August meeting, but our strategic plan currently commits to be available to give those kinds of presentations, like Ed mentioned. I think you're right on the money that it's an important way to make sure that everybody kind of understands that we have the estuary program and the kind of value that it delivers. And so we welcome those invitations and would like to present.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity to talk about your partnerships with each entity, because our staff gets so busy working, they don't necessarily relate that it's this partnership that's making that happen. And so I think it's an important thing to do that.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted, I support exactly what, Commissioner and the council member are saying. As City of Clearwater, we obviously put our legislative priorities together, and I spent 2 weeks during the legislative session in Tallahassee with Florida League of Cities as well as Suncoast League of Cities. I think those are two important groups as well to make sure that we're educating them and sharing with them the importance of what this group does, and maybe making, we leave entire pamphlets and booklets and pictures and I can't recall any of that being included in any of the municipality, League of Cities, or Suncoast League of Cities. So I think those are valuable opportunities to be a part of.
Yeah, we certainly will make better efforts to both present and provide you guys information that will support the estuary program in the future through your individual lobbying efforts. So there are usually around the February time period, we try to produce a return on investment document specific to each of the partners, but we could build upon that over the course of this next year and kind of work with individually with and tailor our sort of messaging to you guys as individual needs. As Maya mentioned, the legislative priorities we usually bring to the board in November, and it's probably a little bit late at that time. So if the timing needs to be adjusted, we're happy to work with each of the individual partners to accommodate accordingly.
Any other questions? I've got some thoughts too. As I was thinking about this in discussions, I think that presentations are great, the communication is great, so I think it's something to definitely incorporate. I want to get back to, as far as funding, look at plans, is how to work. I've sat in the Gulf Consortium since its start. And the focus was to try to fix the Gulf as quick as possible with all the projects we can. And by the way, congratulations, you're now one of the members of the executive committee.
Thank you.
We pointed you yesterday. Another hat for you. So in looking at the great job that the team did getting part two money from the consortium, I was pushing for baffle boxes, litter traps, et cetera, to make an impact. From that moment, we've got one project we just approved a couple months ago that is the first project going through. There's still at least what, $2 million left?
So the first phase will fund about $1.5 million of planning and permitting, and then there's another $8 million to actually implement projects.
Right, and part of that's showing jointly with the regional planning council.
Yep.
Okay, so in saying, and I just kind of divide them in half and half, but looking at what's going on, and the estuary has helped me, provided good information of all the water that's dumped into the bay right now. The numbers are huge, the nitrogen load is huge, and there's ways to actually do it. And we've got a plan up in Newport Richey that we're a joint partner with the city of Newport Richey, and we can't keep up with the water that's there. We got a plan to go forward to go take the reclaimed water out. But I think that if we look at all the plants that we've got, and there's plenty of them, Maya can name them if she wants. But I think there's an opportunity to go for part two money, maybe get matching NOAA money. As this money's starting to dwindle down, if we can't use it for we already have it allocated, I think it's something we should be looking at putting into it. It won't affect our taxes, our money, but somebody's gonna get that money. So it might as well be Florida, might as well be the estuary compared to the other 5 states that are involved with it, because that money's open for everybody and the best projects win. And I think if the estuary leads, it'll go a long way to make it happen. So it's very, very expensive to build another plant, to change another plant, but it's a lot less expensive to change the piping. And then when you change the piping, the benefits are you don't have to use as much water for irrigation and other things. So I think if you guys could, staff could actually bring something back to us, how we can lead for that. I think it's worth a shot. To the monies that we have already coming up, I think it's very worthwhile. Because anything we're gonna do for the beaches on the coast or even in the bay, it's all good to actually use. And if we're gonna share it with regional planning council, et cetera, I think that should be our number one focus coming up, because I think that's the biggest bang for a buck we can have right off the bat. And the quicker we do it, I think it'll show very well for the council that takes a look at it.
Yeah, I think we're always interested in leveraging funding resources as much as possible. We're supporting City of Largo's upgrades at their plant through some of the IIJ funding from prior years. So if there's entities interested in pursuing those restore funds for wastewater treatment plant upgrades or changes to their operation, we'd be happy to kind of explore that with each of those individual entities. Like you mentioned, Escambia County has used that money in the past, and they were successful getting it. We're happy to work with any entity interested. We don't own those facilities, so we need a willing partner that wants to pursue those as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. So on the pot, it's pot 3 funds, it's state approved, state expenditure plan. Escambia County had a big chunk of money, like they all did up to the top 8 and the Panhandle. They took all their money to build the very advanced wastewater treatment plant to keep the water from going to the Gulf. It was actually a smart move on their part, because one project to go with, they got all their money right up front while the values were still even good, a little bit better then. And it's worked out great for them. That money was justified, the state approved it, they liked it. I think the feds would love it as well. So I think if we try to look at that, however we do it, whether it's building a new plant or just getting that water going from out of the bay, if you think about it, if you cut down all the irrigation that goes on all around, and now you can put a better use to it, you're gonna pump less water, you're gonna use less surface water, and it's gonna be environmentally, Mother Nature will then treat the rest of it, go through, and that raises water levels up all the way around. And then natural water flows will increase or keep pace to where they need to just naturally filter. They were designed before the humans got involved. If you could bring something together, I think we need to bring all our utility plants in that want to take part. I think they all should want to at least come to the table. So I think if we have that awareness of who they are, it'll help. And let's get them to the table. I think it's a great opportunity to get money, not even to leverage money, but to bring money in that otherwise would just go somewhere else.
And Kelly, I don't know if you want to speak at all about the working group that you guys have been organizing ever since 2015, 2016 with all the wastewater facilities in the region.
Our utility summit that we do. We started back in 2015. We pull all the directors of the various utilities in our district together twice a year as kind of a network and to share best practices, lessons learned, things that go well, things that don't. Our last one, I think, was last year. And so we're planning to have another one this year. And one of the big issues, at least from a department perspective, is the capacity issues of wastewater plants and with all the development that's going on and how does infrastructure keep up, dealing with nitrogen issues. And then Senate Bill 64. I mean, there's so many different components, but it's been great conversations over the last years and just kind of connecting folks. I think Pinellas County utility directors meet on their own is what we've been told.
So I got a question. We have a commissioner that is passionate about building reservoirs either around or near wastewater treatment facilities. I guess Manatee does that.
I don't know about Manatee. I think
Okay.
one
Well,
of the
they do.
commissioners. reached out to us.
So they do, they have built like a retention pond. So if they ever have a spill, it's captured in that pond and it never goes off the property. Which I think is very interesting. And one of our commissioners really wants to pursue that and see if the cities and the county would be willing to do something like that. So it's always contained and therefore it will never leach into a creek, it will never leach into other property. It'll always stay maintained on that property. And I just didn't know if you had information on that, but if you're not aware of manatees, then I guess not. But he's done his research and he's flying around the country to see who's doing that. And that's another concept. If it's economical to do that, maybe retrofitting those pipes and everything else might be more expensive. And you still have a chance of overflows. But if there's a way to capture it so it never leaves the property, then you're still protecting the environment. So it's just a thought, and it's something he's pursuing hard. And now that he's found locations that have done it, he's really pushing that hard. So I'll see if I can get more information if you're interested.
It sounds like he's proposing what we know as a RIB, a rapid infiltration basin. So it's, you treat the wastewater through the plant, and then instead of discharging on an outfall to surface water, it goes to this RIB, and then it's percolating down. So no, it never leaves the site, but it's the disposal option that those particular plants want to use. And Haines City in Polk County has a RIB. There's several wastewater plants that have RIBs. This is what it sounds like.
Okay, well, I'm gonna look it up and see what the pros and cons are. I just didn't know if you knew of some that,
That's what it sounds like to us.
and it's a rib.
A rapid infiltration
Rapid
basin.
infiltration,
So the
yeah.
water's been treated and now it's just sitting in a pond and percolating into the ground.
Yeah, well, his thought is more just for capture on overflows, not as a
From the
process.
actual plant.
Right,
Gotcha.
not for processing, just to make sure it's a capture so that it never leaves the property. So he's not looking at it as a constant filtration system like you're
Okay.
talking about. And it could be, but his concern is when we start dumping hundreds of millions of gallons, you know, instead of letting it get into a creek that leads to the bay or something like that, that it can be captured on the property and it never leaves. Just a thought, but I'll look into it.
I think from the estuary program's perspective, any new or updated way of looking at disposal of that existing discharge and the nutrient polishing that could occur through these ribs or storage
Yeah.
is a benefit to the downstream waters in the bay itself. So there are a variety of options, and that depending on the facility could be contemplated towards these funding resources that we've been talking about. And with the sort of the point of view we've been talking about in the federal funding outlook, it might be necessary to start looking at alternative funding mechanism like restore funds to support some of those efforts, because WIFIA SRF funding might not be robust in the future. So we have to look at, other ways to fund those projects if there's not an interest to bond those projects internally.
Well, part of the reason to bring up the restore, the money is going to be running out in a few years. So
Yeah.
getting ahead of it now is probably the biggest thing to go, because as it dwindles, it goes, but we can allocate it out. DEP federally has a seat on that council that makes those decisions. And again, with the pots of money that are out there, the quicker we go. I'm happy to have your person reach out to our utilities department. We've got ribs, we've got reservoirs. So we've done those things. We've actually even worked with SWIFMA to purchase a property up in the Crossbar Ranch by a farm that's up there. We built like 7 ponds that hold water. Sometimes when you do that, what you'll do is you affect the water situation, the table even dramatically high. And sometimes the wet season now it gets even impactful for the neighbors around. So you gotta be careful when you do that type of thing. But for the most part, it does take the water. Pasco County's put so many reclaimed water lines. Literally, I could take for every house, we could just keep on going, but we're actually slowing down our new developments coming in because we can't serve the people that we already set the lines up for right now. There's ways to do it with, if there's I think we had a gas plant up at one of our components, and that gas plant took so much water, reclaimed water to treat, that it depleted what we thought we'd get for our residents. So there's other alternatives even for those things to take a look at, but every alternative I think is good to look at. I'm glad you guys have that meeting. I think I want to go to the next one.
Sure.
But I think we need to try to move quick to try to take advantage of this, knowing all that's out there. The opportunity is big, but I think the SRO should lead the way and work with DEP to kind of bring it, because the knowledge that we can share, I think would be great.
Yeah, and certainly what Kelly expressed in terms of concerns for future capacity of each of these facilities is top of mind for us as well, because we've basically doled out a piece of a pie to each of the individual entities and facilities according to a sort of a standard that we adopted through the Nitrogen Management Consortium. And I'll talk about that in an agenda item next, but those sort of long-term planning and thinking about how we best dispose of this water is a regional conversation we need to have.
I think that's plan.
I was just gonna say, I think an important part of your point is that we ought not be disposing of it. We might treat it as a valuable resource and be looking for 100% reuse, because it'll help offset the water demand for potable water in other ways. And so it's really valuable to be able to serve that to people rather than to just discharge it directly back into the environment, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like the number one thing we're trying to do, keep the estuary clean as possible. The best way is keep the water, all of it out there as quick as possible. Find the best way possible. And again, I thought there was just always the one plant, Howard Current. I didn't know there was like 3 or 4 others out there. So all those loads that are there, so easy to work with. And again, we've got capacity to take it all right now and use it. And with more piping that we could get, we could bring it elsewhere, like Hillsborough County, with all their development coming in. They'd be able to take it all and put it in all their homes. It takes, let's see, 4 homes or 5 homes to be able to support another home with reclaimed water. So all that development will now be a negative light effect. And when you figure irrigation, it's the biggest use of water anyway. So if you can take it all in, it makes it a lot better.
Why don't we put this on our tri-county agenda?
I like it.
Chair, has there been, Ed, you might be able, has there been any discussions with the city of Clearwater? We're in the process of building a master plan for a consolidated water plant off of McMullen Booth, pulling 3 of our water treatment facilities off of the coastline and going to the highest ground in our entire city. Has there been any discussions on funding partnerships with the city?
Not specific funding partnerships for those projects. Each of the entities, I think in the region have developed plans to more beneficially reuse some of the existing discharges in the bay. There's just been difficulties of finding the funds to fully implement or find the actual customers to take some of that water as well. I know that's been sort of the sort of stopping block in the past, depending on which facility you're talking about. But I think each entity in the region has, especially now with implementation of Senate Bill 64 by 2032, is being compelled to kind of look at that a little bit closer in terms of how we could use those discharges more beneficially in the future. So again, if there's ways to leverage different funding resources that haven't been traditionally looked at for these plans, and ways to bring all partners to the table to get something done, then I think we're open to that.
Even to ensure we're doing best practices and on resiliency, making sure we are discharging in the most effective and efficient way. Not just belts, but $100 million plan is pretty massive.
And I think if there's a way to treat it best you can, it's great. Minimize what does go in the bay, but the ultimate would be still do the same type of treatment. But if we can move it to go to another area, even if it's a long drive, it's probably worth it just to get it out. And it's hard when you're so dense in certain areas to actually use it. So you got to find a place to go. Certain, like I say, certain energy plants could work to help take the load off. Agriculture is easy, regular lawns are easy, and if people are set up for it. To try to build that infrastructure and afterward it's I'll say impossible, but just really unfeasible. So it's good to like let's go look at it, go in, and Maya, maybe you could even just tell us, just so everybody can be aware, how many plants you are that are dumping in to the bay right now, or even the Gulf of America.
Off the top of my head, out of the, I mean, around 10, probably, less than 10.
And Duke Energy is.
Yeah,
You've got
there's
power plants.
there's
that
about
have-
60 facilities within the Tampa Bay watershed that have allocations to the Tampa Bay Nitrogen Management Consortium.
For
Yes, yes.
wastewater treatment plants.
So
But-
both
but they
industrial
don't
and
have-
domestic.
I was just gonna say, there's a lot of discussion around Senate Bill 64, which is of course really important and consequential for folks, but this has obviously been a priority of our legislature as well. And so the Clean Waterways Act is also encouraging those who don't have a current direct discharge to surface water bodies. There's also, new requirements for those that are within the boundary of a reasonable assurance plan, BMAP or a TMDL, to move to advanced wastewater treatment. So those facilities that haven't been discharging to surface waters, they might not be at advanced wastewater treatment standards. And there's also requirements that are trying to bring those facilities up to snuff on the treatment side as well. And I think that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. We talk a lot about eliminating the discharges, but we're not talking about, the need to bring everybody's treatment levels up to, a newer technology.
So, and working with all of them, so there's that many plants out there, just think about this, if we're starting down in the southern part of Pinellas and Hillsborough, or let's say Pinellas anyway, if we're gonna bring the water up and take every single one of those plants, all of a sudden, those length of lines is shorter because they're connecting to another one, and if everything lines up together, we can bring it all the way up, and let's face it, the waters flow down. I mean, Pinellas County years ago bought all the land up in Pasco to protect their water source. Well, if a lot of water is coming out of Crossbar and I still have a dry lake up there, I could take all that water up there, naturally put it there, and then when Tampa Bay water needs it, they'll have it. And naturally, Mother Nature can do the treatment on it all the way down and just make it a lot easier. So I think it's worthy, especially knowing there's that Part 2 money that's gonna be going away over time. I think there's probably like 4 or 5 years left. Now's a great time to reach out to it, knowing what we know right now. And I think Estuary from the get-go, when the consortium had started, had a big voice as what to do and how to treat.
I think that's good for Tri-County.
Yeah, okay. So we're gonna have you come to the Tri-County too. And maybe if we get some of your committee there. and talk about it as
Yeah,
well.
that was my plan, was to see if we can get both agencies to present. So I already put a note for my administrator. Make sure you put a note for yours.
Okay, good. All right, any discussion there?
This is an action item.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you for the lively discussion. Number 7, Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund Project.
Morning. My name's Jessica, and some of y'all are new faces to me anyway. I help manage the Tampa Bay Environmental Restoration Fund, or TBERF, I call it for short, so I don't have to say all those words to you so many times. quick reminder of what it is. It's a competitive grant program that we co-manage with the Organized Estuaries. It's a national nonprofit. And we do that as a public-private partnership. So we bring in many of the public contributions and then also bring in some of the private contributions, and we get some private contributions in as well. The TBER program helps implement the Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan for Tampa Bay. We use it to help us pursue emerging issues or things that we're perhaps not making enough progress on, but the focus is on habitat restoration, water quality improvement, also includes applied research and some other things too. So this year, our contributors include a lot of y'all here, which is really great, and thanks so much for your support. It's Hillsborough County and the EPC, Manatee and Pinellas County. We also received a grant from the Water Management District and some private contributions from Community Foundation, Mosaic, Crossway Memorial Fishing Tournament, and some others as well. So this year we brought together approximately $737,000 available for TBERF. It is a program that we publish an RFP for every year. This year the RFP was open January to March, as it usually is. We received 17 applications. Of those applications, they total a cumulative funding request of about $1.8 million. So in front of you today, we have some recommendations that was put together. These applications were reviewed by members of those contributors. They make up our review team. They provide findings back to us as the program staff, and Ed has made the recommendations in front of you today. They include projects from around the watershed. They include some sort of boots on the ground restoration projects, as well as applied research. And I believe that's all the information I have to give to you. Oh, and the total funding recommendation is $727,000 approximately. Happy to take any questions, or Ed, if you want to have any.
No, you covered. Any questions, comments?
Move approval.
What was that? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. And the Habitat Master Plan Oyster Restoration Contractor Selection.
So likewise, we advertised a request for proposals to conduct on-the-ground habitat restoration for oyster reefs. This is a priority of our Habitat Master Plan and something that we've been trying to encourage our partners to advance. We're currently meeting our interim targets, but we have more work to go in terms of meeting the goal for 2050. So we advertised the request for proposals. We advertised it both broadly to the community writ large, but we also, because this was something where planning, permitting, and design activities were not eligible for support under this proposal, we did do directed outreach to those entities who we know have a current permit in any of those priority water bodies, specifically Old Tampa Bay or the Manatee River. So after advertising the request for proposals, we did receive one proposal, and that's okay because, like I said, there's not a whole lot of permits that are out there. And that was from Oyster River Ecology, a nonprofit that operates primarily in Manatee County in the Manatee River, although they have been doing work both in Hillsborough and Pinellas counties as well. Their proposal is to restore about a 1/4 acre of oyster substrate in the Manatee River, sort of between 75 and Fort Hammer. They are proposing a really novel technique, something called oyster rag pots. That's where they take a cotton rag and they soak it in a marine friendly concrete. It sort of makes like a cup shape, and they're able to attach that cotton rag and concrete to a stainless steel anchor, and then they anchor it in the sediment. And what this means is that it's providing low relief substrate in a more cost-effective manner than using recycled or fossilized shells. So they're able to get more oyster restoration done for less money. And they're also able to engage the community through volunteer building events. So we thought that the one proposal that we did receive was responsive to all of the criteria that we put out there. So therefore, you'll see the recommendation that we enter into agreement with Oyster River Ecology for an amount not to exceed $60,000.
How did that go with as far as what you expected the bid to come in at? How did the numbers line up? Was it more money, less money?
I think that it was, I think it's not so much, I expected the money to be about the full amount, but it was a matter of how much restoration they were able to achieve for that amount. The cost per acre for oyster restoration tends to vary wildly, and this is a very cost competitive proposal to do a quarter acre for $60,000.
Any other questions?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Executive directors and staff reports.
A couple of reports. While I have the opportunity, I just wanted to take the time to recognize Tom McGill, who is the EPA Region 4 designated policy board member for us. He's able to join us remotely today. But Tom is getting close to retirement. He hasn't officially announced a date, but this might be his last board meeting. So I just wanted to recognize that, you know, for over the past 32 years, he's been working at EPA since 1993. Currently serves as the chief of Oceans, Wetlands, and Streams Protection Branch. And he's been overseeing not only our program, the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, but several others in the Southeast, National Estuary Programs represented in the Southeast, as well as the Clean Water Act Section 404 program, ocean dumping regulated under the Marine Protection Research and Sanctuaries Act, the Section 319 non-point source program, and the South Florida Geographic Program. So Tom's been busy at EPA and has given us very sound counsel and advice throughout the years. We're sad to see him go, but wish him well in his retirement. I just want to make sure that he was acknowledged for all the contributions he's made as the EPA rep on our Tampa Bay Estuary Program Policy Board. Tom, I don't know if you want, I'll put you on the spot. I don't know if you want to say a couple words or not, but we very much appreciate everything you've done for our program in the past.
Thank you, Ed. Very much appreciate those kind words, but I have especially appreciated, I mean, the wonderful opportunity I've had to be part of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. You know, what I've enjoyed the most about working at EPA is the people, both within my organization, but also the great people that have been part of the policy board and that have worked for the worked for the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. You, Ed, Holly Green, Maya, everyone on your staff is just top notch. But I've also really appreciated the actual environmental results y'all have achieved. You know, hitting the mark in terms of your seagrass restoration goals has absolutely been remarkable and recognized across the country. Tampa Bay Estuary Program is a model NEP. And that's the view of the folks that work in the National Estuary Program at our headquarters office within our region, and the National Estuary Programs across the country. I believe all recognize it as well. So a true pleasure to be a part of this. And yeah, being a part of this is what I'll miss the most. I talked to Ed and Meyer earlier this week. I hope to come to, after I retire, I hope to come to some of these policy board meetings as a member of the public. I live in Atlanta, but I do plan to do some traveling once I retire. But anyway, thanks for the acknowledgement and recognition, and it's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Tom. Again, we appreciate your service. I did talk.
Tom, I want to thank you for your service as well. And are you ever coming down to this area? Because I think a picture in the bushes would be a great thing.
Yeah, I have some family in Sarasota, and so yeah, I do plan to make it down. But
set up a
thank you very much.
Please let us know. We'd like to acknowledge you and thank you in person as well.
Very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks again, Tom. I did talk a little bit about our federal funding outlook. I think this August will give us opportunity, and we'll have probably a little bit more information now at that time, based on where the government is at for appropriations for fiscal year 2027 planning for us and beyond. So it'll be apropos kind of talk about the best ways to move forward based on that funding outlook. like I said, I'm hoping for the best, but planning for the worst in terms of what that support might be in the future. We have garnered a lot of bipartisan support at the congressional level, not only in the state of Florida, but throughout the country with other national shape programs doing a similar, if not as well as work in those other areas throughout the country. So we're hoping that we'll make it through and be able to continue doing the good work that we're doing here in Tampa Bay. But more to come at that August meeting, and we'll have a little bit better picture at that time. As we talked about at the February board meeting, we were trying to organize a little boat tour to kind of talk about issues in Old Tampa Bay as well as projects that were implemented. We were actually planning for that next Friday. Doesn't look like we get a good response, so we're probably going to postpone it to later in the summer, unfortunately. It might be a little bit warmer boat tour later in the summer, but we do think it's still important to kind of highlight the work that needs to be done in that bay segment in particular, because we've had great success in the majority of Tampa Bay, but that bay segment in particular is still struggling to achieve water quality and seagrass coverage goals that we set out in the past. So more to come on that. We'll probably follow up with y'all a little bit later to confirm the date later this summer.
Can I ask a question? Would you all prefer that I send out a poll with options, or would just let you know when we can get a vote and then see if you're able to make it?
I think options are good. I'm very delighted that you guys can't make it either. Because
Yeah, I would have gone over
Some
myself.
could.
I'm actually gonna go to DC, move my grandson up to DC with my daughter Amber. So I was gone for that weekend, driving a truck pretty much, and we got people doing heavy loads, unloading as well, but so not being there, I was sad about it, but I think options would be great. We can take a look at it and we kind of get your feedback from that. It'd be a great idea.
Fridays as a day work best, or do you prefer other days of the week as in the mix too?
It all depends for me. There's a lot of Friday meetings we tend to get now, so.
Yeah,
Fridays used to be good, but
Fridays and Mondays are open, middle of the week, forget.
Okay, gotcha.
Mondays might be good.
Yeah, Mondays might be
So,
good.
I'm flexible. It all depends how it fits.
All right, well, I'll take that and we'll see what we can figure out that works for more folks.
Yeah, awesome. Great.
And one other update I just wanted to mention, the Water Management District every 2 years publishes a coverage of Tampa Bay in terms of seagrasses. That's basically our bright line in terms of understanding the health of Tampa Bay. We established a 40,000 acre total coverage goal for the Bay. We largely exceeded that up until 2016. Since that time, we lost about 11,000 acres of seagrass, but this latest assessment in 2024 shows some signs of recovery and some positive results. We've gained back about 1,400 acres, about 5% seagrasses in Tampa Bay. So we've seen some recovery in the majority of the Bay, with the exception of Old Tampa Bay. And I'll kind of be talking about that. We've actually saw continued loss of seagrass coverage in Old Tampa Bay. And it's now at its all-time low in terms of total coverage observed, going all the way back to the 1980s when this assessment was first conducted by the Water Management District. So again, this gives us pause as a regional environmental management program, and I'll be kind of talking about what we think are sort of the next steps to get that Bay segment back on track, working with you all as entities that have nitrogen load responsibility throughout the Tampa Bay watershed. So more to come on that. I just wanted to highlight those positive notes in terms of seagrass coverage increases. This is the first time over the past 3 assessments that we actually seen an increase. The prior 3 assessments, we saw a decline. So that gives me some optimism that we might have turned the curve in terms of seeing recovery in the Bay. Other than that, I'll turn it over quickly to Sheila. She could talk about a Give a Day for the Bay event later this summer.
Yeah, so we are having a cleanup. It's kind of an annual cleanup that we do at Bishop Harbor, which is in Manatee County at Terracea Preserve State Park. So we have, we're partnering with a kayak outfitter who's providing kayaks for some individuals that want to participate but don't have their own kayaks. But then we also still have room for folks with kayaks or canoes or john boats that want to help us clean up some trash out of the waterways. There is a boat launch there, so we'll be launching our vessels at the boat launch and then paddling out or driving out to Mariposa Key, which is kind of right at the mouth of Terracea, Terracea, or Bishop Harbor, sorry. And then we'll be cleaning up out on there. We expect to pull in a ton of trash because of all the storms that we experienced last year. So it's always a really fun event, getting out on the water and helping to protect and restore Tampa Bay. So if you are interested in participating, there's a registration on our website, or you can reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to give you all the details.
And one last update, I'll turn over to Jessica. She mentioned it before about our Bay Mini Grant program, if you want to just highlight that as well.
Sure. So the Bay Mini Grant is another one of our competitive grant programs that implements the CCMP. It's a smaller grant at $5,000, but it is currently open. The focus is on engaging community members in some way, whether through a very small restoration project like a rain garden installation, or just planting native plants, something like that, or through environmental education. So it would be really helpful if y'all are interested to share this. If you have like a newsletter for your district or your entity, that would be great. I've got some graphics that I can send to y'all, as well as the link. We're currently accepting applications all the way through September. We do that to sort of try to catch schools before they go out of season. So it's open for a while, so we've got some time to help advertise that.
Spread the word. We have one agenda, last agenda item.
Number 10, project highlight of Old Tampa Bay Assimilative Capacity Assessment Update.
Have
About
about
Maya was gonna be doing the presentation.
45
I
minutes.
guess I'll cheat up there.
About 45 minutes, kind of talk through this. It's actually an item that was requested by the Tampa Bay Measured Management Consortium to bring to both the management board and policy board for additional feedback. This is, again, kind of working on some of the issues that we're experiencing in the Old Tampa Bay and working with all the permitted entities that are represented in the Old Tampa Bay watershed. I know there's a lot of new board members now, so I kind of want to go through some of the history and how we arrived at sort of where we're at in terms of this decision point. But basically what we're asking for from you all as board members is to provide that feedback back to the Nitrogen Management Consortium, who will be meeting again next week, to kind of look at what is the most prudent path forward to better manage that system, working in tandem with the Department of Environmental Protection through our reasonable assurance plan updates. So all that being said, you know, there's been a long and lengthy history of the estuary program facilitating a group called the Tampa Bay Nitrogen Management Consortium, going all the way back to sort of the inception of our program in the early 1990s. Not long after we were developed as a national estuary program, we developed specific seagrass recovery goals I kind of talked about, but there was also the need to kind of think about how seagrass recovery was being impacted in Tampa Bay, and the primary pollutant source that was sort of controlling the necessary environment to foster seagrass recovery was nutrient loading or nutrients flowing into Tampa Bay. And those are regulated to the department as well as EPA through permits to both wastewater facilities, domestic wastewater facilities and industrial facilities, as well as MS4s, municipal separate stormwater systems. So stormwater permits that each of your entities have within the region. So we developed sort of these overall guiding targets to put the Bay back on track back in the mid 1990s. And that's sort of that Partnership for Progress document that was developed at that time. And through sort of several actions that were occurring based on some litigation, there were some consent decrees through EPA that were mandating certain TMDLs be established at that time. Those sort of target loading rates were adopted as the federally recognized TMDL for Tampa Bay. And those were basically the bright lines that we were trying to manage nutrient loading to in the Tampa Bay system. Those federally recognized TMDLs then got translated into a reasonable assurance plan later on in the late 2000s that basically carved up that overall limit to individual entities represented throughout the region. And they're not only the entities represented here in the policy board, but all the entities listed on the right, both public and private partners that have those permitted load responsibilities in Tampa Bay. So again, it kind of created almost like a cap and trade system in terms of the amount of loading that could go into the bay at that time. Also, during the development of some of those regulations, there was acknowledgement that we get year-to-year variation in annual rainfall, and sort of the compliance assessment that was set up at the beginning scaled that loading relative to the amount of rainfall that we had. So ultimately, we were adopted numeric nutrient criteria that related to the clarity of water, mainly through the identification of a chlorophyll A standard for each of the bay segments. But then there was this thing called a nitrogen delivery ratio that was also developed that was related to the loading rates that were would achieve that chlorophyll A condition. And more or less since about 2001, every 5 years, we've been updating that reasonable assurance plan to the state and providing that as sort of our documentation of our strategies to better manage water quality in Tampa Bay to support seagrass recovery. And it's been adopted and viewed as a sort of a successful collaborative partnership by the department over the course of these years. The latest update that was delivered to the state in 2022 actually showed sort of this acknowledgement of what's happening in Old Tampa Bay, the continued seagrass loss, as well as not meeting those chlorophyll A standards. So these red lines are basically showing a water quality standard and the observations that are monitored throughout Tampa Bay. And the blue dotted line is sort of the regulation that we have to stay under in terms of that chlorophyll A condition. So over the course of this last 5-year update, that gray bar, we've actually been exceeding it more than we're allowed to, according to state regulation. So that has prompted sort of a response through this regional assurance process that we need to sort of look at what's going on in that bay segment. And although we not been meeting this chlorophyll A standard, we have been meeting what was called the nitrogen delivery ratios, that scaled limit based on rainfall. So there's been this disconnect between water quality conditions and sort of the other trigger related to the permit conditions allowable under the reasonable assurance plan.
Hey, can I stop you while you're on the graph?
Yep.
So look at the up and down. I don't know what would cause it. Do you have any reason to know what would cause those big spikes and those big drops?
Yeah, a lot of that is due to different hydrologic conditions where we got a lot more rainfall, a lot more stormwater going into the bay. And you'll see that it relates a little bit more closely to the actual loads that are observed rather than to the scaled loads based on the hydrologic conditions. And I'll kind of talk about that in a second, but did that answer enough?
Enough for now, okay.
Yeah, so that red text is basically outlining what we've told the department that we would do over this next reasonable assurance cycle, which we're currently in from the 2022 to 2026 period. It's basically what we needed to do as a community to get the space segment back on track so that we can meet these water quality standards in the future. And that sort of also related to the conditions we've been seeing in terms of seagrass coverage. So although I just mentioned some positive recovery in 2024 throughout the Tampa Bay watershed and each of the individual bay segments, we have continued to see this loss of seagrasses in Old Tampa Bay. So not only have we not met that chlorophyll A numeric nutrient criteria, we're also seeing a negative response in terms of seagrass coverage. Again, that bright line of estuarine health that we've used going back to the 1990s. So that red line basically in each graph is where we want to be in terms of total seagrass coverage. And we're far below that in Old Tampa Bay, and we'll continue to see declines. And again, that sort of has prompted what we have told the department we would do as this collaborative, this nitrogen management consortium, of acting on when this disconnect occurs. When we're not meeting that water quality standard, But this delivery ratio that we've been used to assess compliance is still not sort of matching up or jiving. And that has prompted what we've been calling the Old Tampa Bay Assimilative Capacity Assessment Study. We've been working with the contractor since 2024 to kind of develop a new look of what those relationships might be for this bay segment. And everyone has sort of agreed to sort of this process. We sent out a declaration of cooperation that many of the entities. Let me try to hide this. It's not. We sent out a declaration of cooperation that most of the consortium members have signed at this point to kind of work together towards this end of resolving this disconnect between that water, not meeting that water quality standard, as well as seeing how we could better manage nutrient loads to Tampa Bay to help meet those water quality standards in the future. And one of the first sort of tasks along those lines was kind of revisiting this paradigm of that if we continue to reduce the amount of nutrients flowing into Tampa Bay, we'll reduce the propensity of algal blooms. It's represented in that chlorofoi standard, bright line that we're trying to manage towards, and that we'll get seagrass back based on clearing up the waters. Through the first task of that assimilative capacity assessment, one of the main recommendations is moving towards this sort of static load or the observed load that would help us meet that the chlorofoi water quality standard in the future. But there's also some management targets that were developed specific to harmful algal blooms in some of the subsegments of Old Tampa Bay. I won't be talking about those. I'll probably bring those back both to our technical advisory committee, and then those recommendations will flow up to our management board and policy board. But what I'm mainly going to be talking about today is that red box of this new sort of way of looking at compliance moving forward based on the absolute observed loads in that bay segment moving forward. And that's truly sort of the recommendation that the Nitrogen Management Consortium has been looking for feedback from not only this board, but the management board on, because it is sort of changing the way we would assess compliance in the future. That blue line is basically the observed loads, and that matches much more closely to the chlorofoi conditions, the water quality conditions that you mentioned, Commissioner Mariano, compared to that red line. The red line is how we're assessing compliance right now. So that red line continues to decrease, which is great news. That means the amount of nutrients per unit water flowing into Tampa Bay continues to go down. But the bay, in particular, Old Tampa Bay seems to be responding to the total loading, not that scaled level. And that disconnect is what we're trying to resolve with this recommendation. So moving forward, the graphs on the bottom relate that as we move closer to the original federally recognized TMDL, which is 486 tons per year of total nitrogen for that particular bay segment, there's much greater likelihood that we'll meet a chlorofoi condition that is supportive of seagrass recovery in Old Tampa Bay. There is no real relationship with the normalized load as we assess compliance now in that bay segment. And that's in particular to this bay segment only because of certain physical perturbations that limit the amount of exchange with water. And once nutrients get into that bay segment, they tend to stick around and stay there, and algal blooms tend to capitalize on that. That's why we see a harmful algal bloom occur almost every summer. It's called pyridinium in that bay segment. And that's what we're trying to control for moving forward as we better manage nutrient loads going into that bay segment. So this is not a new number. This is sort of those original targets that we developed back in the 1990s, but how we look at compliance in the future is what we're changing, not scaling it to, according to the total amount of rainfall relative to a period in time that isn't representative of the hydrologic conditions occurring now in that bay segment. And that's really the sort of the crux of the decision point of the consortium, because I think we did a little bit of disservice and kind of previewed sort of what the ramifications could be to each of the members. We've had one-on-one discussions with each of the consortium participants, and most of those green bullet points are supportive points of moving in this direction. They recognize that Old Tampa Bay is suffering in terms of water quality, in terms of that ecological response in terms of overall seagrass coverage. A lot of entities felt that, this sort of regulatory, this new regulatory approach would further compel investments towards needed actions that we know needs to occur in this bay segment. But they also supported alternative sort of approach of meeting those water quality standards in the future that didn't have to necessarily relate to nutrient loading. There's continued sort of recommendations of improving tidal circulation through causeway improvements, other ways that we could restore oyster habitat to have water quality filtration benefits in that bay segment. So there are alternatives that could complement nutrient load reductions in this bay segment in the future. And we probably have to do a lot of that work together to get a response. But ultimately, like I said, I think we did a little bit of disservice of kind of presenting what the ramifications might be to each of the individual entities. And this table is setting up sort of the differences in assessing compliance based on that scaled hydrologic load, which is on the far right. Most of the entities under the current compliance assessment framework are not exceeding their allocation. And this is looking at over the past 10 years. But if we shifted towards this absolute load, then a lot of folks are in red. And this isn't necessarily how compliance would be assessed as part of the reasonable assurance process, but we offer this sort of as a preview to plan ahead through the reasonable assurance process of identifying the needed reductions moving forward that we all would have to collaboratively work on, not individually work on, as part of the nitrogen management consortium process. And that sort of has been the trigger of why there's been sort of a standstill in terms of moving forward with this sort of recommendation. And some of the assurance I've provided last week to the management board, as well as individual entities, as part of the reasonable assurance process, there's always been sort of a collaborative looking at what's going on the bay wide level, this bay segment wide level. And this graph is a little bit complicated, but what's important to pay attention to is the X marks on the top. That's the trigger in terms of not meeting a water quality standard in 2 concurrent years and the resulting loading conditions that would be assessed in future compliance. So those latest 2 years in 2021 and 2022 are basically what I showed you in that prior graph. And the trigger points for compliance are those red dots that fall a little bit closer to that 486 absolute loading target that we're recommending moving forward. So there's still reductions necessary, but they're not necessarily to the scale of looking at a 10-year average and as I present that in that 10-year table. And these are sort of the things that we would have to report back to the department and come up with a plan to address in the future to bring us closer to that red dotted line more consistently rather than varying so much in and around that sort of compliance assessment point.
And let me ask you a question if I
Yep.
could. Why are you going to use a 5-year average basis?
So that takes into account some of this variation that happens from year to year, because we recognize that every year is not the same in terms of how much rainfall we get, how much loading might go into the bay. And we know that the bay is not responding instantaneously to loading conditions. It is building up a memory of nutrient loads. And the more we could, on average, bring that down, the better response we're going to have in that bay segment. It's being a little bit more realistic to sort of the observed conditions.
There's also a required reporting cadence. So each reasonable assurance plan is submitted to the department every 5 years. And so it's covering these 5-year periods.
I mean, it's a great way to average things out and make it go. But to me, I want to get down to really what's causing the issues that we've got. Clearly, from 95 to 99 doing the studies, I think we should go back to that data, go take a look at what we're doing year to year to year. And I was going to say, let's go take a look at what's being dumped into the bay by the plants. I would then put another graph together to show what the rainfall differences were year to year and go year to year on all of them. And then go see what the correlations really are. Because maybe development increased in one area to another area to another area. With new things coming in that increase the flows that are going in there. But clearly, we need to, I think, take a bigger step at this than just trying to like slowly improve. I think we need to go, let's try to go big. Like I said, with money that's out there, it's gonna go away in a few years. But better to grab it now, and I think you'll have a great argument to say, here's why we need to go do this now. And to go make for a big reach for that funds that are up in the federal. Again, we'll disappear a little bit. But really, I think just from what you're showing us, it's only getting worse, and we think we're doing okay, but clearly it's not doing it. So let's go really dive into those facts that are out there. Let's go look at that rainfall. Let's go see what the increases of the flow, where maybe there was an event that happened at a couple of plants that really just exploded from a breakdown of whatever, might have been a bigger release. So I think it's great for broad planning, et cetera, but if you really want to get down to this, let's go find out what's really causing.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of having now 36 years of data. We could relate the nutrient loading conditions that have happened since 1985 and what Old Tampa Bay is actually listening in terms of a chlorophyll or water quality standard response. And that 84 tons per year reduction to bring us closer to the absolute limit is what we feel is going to help us meet those water quality standards more consistently. And it's not totally disparate of what we've recognized as a nitrogen load reduction need in the past. This is pulling straight from that partnership for projects document in 1998, where we attributed load reduction responsibility to each of the entities. And this was prior to any formal regulations in terms of a federally recognized TMDL or reasonable assurance of plan. This was our all for one for all sort of approach to collectively meet water quality targets in the region that would be supportive of continued seagrass recovery in Tampa Bay. So the direction we're proposing is not much different than the approach we've taken in the past. We're just trying to think about it more pragmatically and realistically that syncs up with the actual water quality observations and response in seagrasses.
But think about that. We're not doing things much differently than we've done before. Ever the time to change is probably now. And I think, Kelly, as you mentioned, is it the growth? Is that a factor? Is that going to hurt us more and more down the road?
Yeah.
I think, again, you need to, I think, just dive down deeper into this. Because I think if you look, and I wouldn't even go to year, I would go like quarter to quarter.
I would like to reassure you that this assessment has been looking at things on a monthly, a seasonal,
Okay.
an annual, and then it's also reported up to this 5-year time step. But we are definitely looking at it at these finer scales. What I think what Ed is trying to present today is in the context of the boat we're all in, which is that 5-year reasonable assurance process. And I think you're still providing really valuable feedback that the Nitrogen Management Consortium will like to hear, because they are very concerned about being out of compliance. And what I think what you're suggesting is that it's important that we go big on load reductions and that we need to do things differently. So I'm reflecting that in the minutes so that it's clear.
Part of my point.
I want to provide you the assurance that we're looking at sub-annual time sets down to the monthly level.
Yeah, and that sort of gets at the crux of what you're talking about, this slide. On the top is basically the number of projects that have been implemented by partners in each of those 5-year updates. And the bottom graph is the total nitrogen load reduction attributed to the amount of those projects. So we've seen a decline in terms of the number of projects and the total tonnage reduction. So that just reinforces what you're saying, is that we need to move closer to that new target at 84 tons to probably get a better response, because we haven't been putting enough effort investment in the space segment to really reduce nutrient loads. And we need to change that for the better in the future. And that sort of the what's motivating sort of this recommendation as well. And a lot of what we receive back in terms of comments from the management board is that sort of these proactive investments make sense for the region because of the economic output of the estuary. And we know that 1 in 10 jobs are tied to a healthy Tampa Bay. Impacts our economic well-being within the region. There's other sort of metrics you could look at in terms of living close to the bay that is healthy versus one that has prone to algal blooms, and sort of impacts on real estate values along those lines. So these upfront investments sort of make a lot of economic sense as well because of the value the bay brings to our region. It is the centerpiece of our region. Clean water, healthy habitats are what's driving a lot of our tourism-driven economy, and some of the numbers you see up here that were developed by the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council during their last economic evaluation study for the Bay. And that's, like I said, sort of the crux of the decision of the process that the consortium has developed is sort of relaying this recommendations to the regulatory bodies, both the Department of Environmental Protection at the state level as well and EPA, in moving sort of this direction and getting their feedback. And then from there, we kind of would need to hash out the more detailed annual compliance assessments that you were talking about, and in different ways to look at this in the future. I think, again, the goal of this recommendation is coming up with an absolute loading recommendation reduction that needs to occur probably over the next 5 or 10 years. Those are sort of the investments that need to be made to bring us back into compliance at this bay-wide level. And the assessments that we've conducted with the contractor over this past year indicate that implementing things like Senate Bill 64 for all entities within that watershed would bring us about halfway to that needed reduction. The other half could be implemented through novel ways to deal with lake tarpon discharges into Old Tampa Bay. If we drank that water instead of discharge it directly into Tampa Bay, then we'd probably make up the other 50% of those load reductions in the future. Absent of those two projects being fully implemented, there's need to invest in a lot of other and different work, and that's where we're focused on stormwater controls in that bay segment throughout the jurisdictions to kind of meet those 84-ton reduction need in the future. And that's sort of what's driving this recommendation and sort of action that's needed to bring us back in compliance, not only with an absolute nitrogen load target, but to help meet water quality standards that are going to be supportive of seagrass coverage that meet our goals in that bay segment. And that's sort of the next steps of the consortium of providing that as a decision memo, and we get feedback from both the department and EPA, and that would be basically built into the next reasonable assurance plan. This is our plan, our partnership for progress moving forward, how we're all going to stay on the same page and get this bay segment back on track. And that's sort of the agreements that we're working towards with this recommendation and trying to drive the region toward. And initial sort of feedback from the management board was positive in terms of trying to work together collaboratively from the region. And this is feedback that we garnered last Friday from the management board. There was a whole lot of support of working together through the reasonable assurance plan rather than individually and working with the regulators, because there's a cost associated with that. And there's oftentimes legal challenges associated with that if everyone went their own separate ways and kind of handled it accordingly. So we're trying to continue to maintain this collaborative approach, looking at the bay segment wide level, working together towards this collective nitrogen load reduction that we think is going to be needed to put this bay segment back on track. And I think there's ways to do that as part of the reasonable assurance process. And rightfully so, I think a lot of the members understood that, this is probably a very cost-effective approach. We're avoiding a lot of costs that we would have to fix things on the back end like we have to do now. We could be proactive in terms of identifying nutrient load reduction, advancing different projects that would have a real benefit for that bay segment. But there is, again, still some trepidation on the effectiveness of pursuing different activities. And there's a real, I think, concern that some of the entities expressed that if we invested in like a stormwater project and we didn't see an immediate result, that is going to reflect negatively on staff to leadership, that because of these investments, we're automatically not seeing a recovery of Old Tampa Bay. And that's just not the way the bay segment operates. We understand that these are probably a long-term recovery, multi-year recovery that's going to take cumulative investments over time and multiple projects to get it back on track. And that overcoming some of those sort of concerns at the staff level is a lot of the main concerns that we have now. But I think one of the best comments we had from that discussion was from our CAC co-chair that said, basically, what good is compliance if we're not meeting our environmental goals in the region. If we have this sort of false compliance assessment that has no real connect with water quality conditions supportive of the seagrass, what use is that to the region? So I think the management board gets it. It's just, again, sort of these concerns of what might be considered sort of individual investments by each entity in the region in the future. I think we're trying to avoid that by talking collectively on this bay segment load reduction that's needed. And we have some really good ideas on how we could get there. It's just a matter of implementing it and investing in those.
I think it's great what you just said about that last quote, because that one's the one that stuck out to me too.
Yeah.
What good is compliance if you're not meeting environmental goals?
Yeah.
One of my old commissioners that was with us, that served us for quite a while in Pasco, when he left, he gave some closing remarks that I thought, have always resonated with me for the past 8 years now. And he said, when you're gonna try to do projects, when you try to make things happen, what you gotta do is not only have a great idea for it, but you gotta find a way to fund it. I think with the nutrient load issue that we've got, with what we know are problems that are out there, opportunities that are out there to get fixed, and a funding source that's there, as bad as it's showing to be, the opportunity is phenomenal. And I think if you guys push it hard, you've got a great argument. You got the state pushing down there, you got the feds pushing down there, and you got a funding source that the feds have, and the states will help push for you. So I think we're in a great position to make something happen and think really big, to really take these loads down even more than what you got. And if you want to say that, as you said, human investments over time, well, it takes time to do anything, right? You want to build a road, get it the MPO, this is 5 years before it's done. You got other things that go on. I've got stormwater projects. A simple project I had up at Pasco. That was on the books 30 years ago. It took me 9 years to get it fully complete. After studying it. But if we can go look at what's out there and make this thing drive, I think you got a huge opportunity to really make this happen.
Yeah, it's really some of the one-on-one feedback we got, that this regulatory trigger could lead to better investment and identification of new funding sources to support the activities that we know that everyone in the region knows needs to occur. It's just, how do we get there together?
I think with this brain trust we got right here and the passion that's here, I think you can make it happen. I got faith in it.
So that was my real general overview. There are a lot of details that I left out. This is very much 100,000 view of this process. There's a lot more technical detail that has been developed from the contractor, but again, the consortium is requesting feedback from both the management board and policy board because of the concerns that I expressed by those individual entities about being viewed automatically out of compliance with permit conditions. So the comments that we're hearing right now, those are the things that we would provide back to the consortium next week. And from there, they would make a decision on whether or not they want to move forward with this recommendation, and then advancing that to the department and EPA to get their feedback on how to integrate that in this next regional assurance plan update. So I want to open it up to y'all. If you have additional comments, we're going to synthesize them like I did on like Maya did on the last slide, and we'll present that to the consortium members next week. So I'll stop there and turn it over to y'all.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a comment, Chair. I think, and Maya, they know or the city's concern about going from normalized to absolute. I just want everybody to understand, once we get to absolute, there will be legal and financial ramification to meet those numbers, because all of us will not be meeting it. So I just want everybody to understand, and that's what my concern is. Can we look at this a little deeper and find out, is there any better way to go with normalized and see if we can get where we need to be without throwing us all into this basket of not being in compliance. So my concern is that we will not be in compliance if we go with the absolute, and the recommendation, in my opinion, DEP and EPA are going to say, wonderful, you want to put it up on yourself. That's wonderful. We're going to take it and please make it work. And my concern is, if it doesn't work legally, where are we? And financially, where are we going to be? So those are the concerns that I brought up at our one-on-one meeting. And I just want the board to think about, before we go that route, is it the best route forward? And I'm just bringing it up as, I'd like to make a motion to get the consulting firm to look at that a little deeper and see financially, legally, where are we? What will happen if we really don't get there in the next year, 2 years, 3 years? Now what?
I'll say it. I'm gonna get something looking at it, but if I get a delay action to go study what's gonna happen if, I mean, I think we just need to take the big approach of what's the biggest thing to do, the best thing to do, because, you know, the bay is gonna be important, but let's face it, we may be solving other things on the Gulf as well. You know, people aren't gonna come to the beaches from Clearwater and St. Pete and up and down all of Pinellas County, et cetera, then that hurts everybody's economy too. So it's not just even that is what I'm worried about. I'm just looking about environmentally, what's the best thing to do? What's the biggest impact? And just go. And look, we've tried this for 20 some odd years, had a good path going, and all of a sudden something turned back. I mean, just, I don't want to slow it down to go study what's going to happen if. I just want to go look at, will these things work and what's recommended? So I don't mind the cost basis, but I don't want to study it to say what's going to happen if we don't make it.
I don't know that studying it. Wording is not correct. Studying what if we don't make it? All I know is we have a normalized right now. Once we go to absolute, all of us will be out of compliance. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we all will be, no matter what happens.
I think that's one of the questions that the decision memo is trying to resolve, because our understanding of the current reasonable assurance process is that you would have to have non-compliance with the algae target, the chlorophyll A target, for 2 years in a row before you begin to look at the loads. And so while that was true at the end of the last reasonable assurance cycle, we have not been in that position for any of the first 3 years of the current reasonable assurance cycle. And so I think what we're trying to do is get all of the consortium members as well as the regulatory agencies to concur that part of the process doesn't change. You don't look at the loads unless you have not met chlorophyll conditions in 2 concurrent years. So I'm not sure that part of the message came across as clearly today, but that's certainly one of the things that the decision memo is looking to resolve, is that question. And I also just wanted to offer that as part of the task 2 report for the Old Tampa Bay assimilative capacity, we did specifically task the contractor to look at alternative approaches to hydrologic normalization, either changing the reference period or is there a different alternative scaling that works. And unfortunately, the relationship between a hydrologically normalized load, no matter how you normalize it, does not really have any explanatory power for the kinds of algae conditions that we're seeing. And so that recommendation is in that alternative is in the appendix, I believe, of that task 2 report. But that's why it hasn't been advanced going forward, is because it just doesn't provide that explanatory power, and it doesn't sort of meet that basic smell test that the Community Advisory Committee chair noted, which is, if you're not going to give us any more information about whether or not we reduce algae blooms, what's really the point of continuing to assess compliance that way?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So, yeah, Hillsborough County shares the same concern about compliance and whatnot, but I think that we also, the bigger issue is maintaining a collaborative approach and that reasonable assurance, under the reasonable assurance. And you worry that if we don't try some alternatives, look at something different, try to recognize we need to do more, then if the reasonable assurance falls apart, we're going to be dealing with all of this individually through our individual needs anyway. And we'd rather stay within that reasonable assurance and collaborative approach with the agencies. Supportive of trying to go forward in this, what was recommended.
And I think Hillsborough's got a great opportunity to work with the city of Tampa, with the Howard Current plant especially, just taking that out to your new developments coming down there. And if you set them all up, and we can happy to coach you guys how we did it up in Pasco, but it's a short run. You got the growth coming anyway. It'll take a lot less stress. And even with everything else you're going down there, it might
Yeah.
Very difficult down the road.
And I think part of the issue with Old Tampa Bay is, it's really stormwater runoff. We're, at least Hillsborough County is close to zero discharge on wastewater right now. Probably will be there in the next handful of years. And so we recognize that we need to do more in terms of projects. We had all this flooding last year, obviously, and so we're looking at implementing flood control projects, and the desire is to include as much water quality improvement and load reduction along with those flood control projects to help improve loads to, especially to Old Tampa Bay. Like Ed mentioned, if the regionally they can look at reducing the discharge from Lake Tarpon to use that water for alternative water supply, that gets you a long way towards that goal. You can never get openings in those causeways, the circulation that gets you, that'll get you there along with that. But we know that needs to be more done in terms of stormwater, water quality, load reduction projects. We're working towards that. The estuary program has the regional stormwater project that's working with a consultant right now to actually look for stormwater regional projects in the area that can be proposed, and that hopefully the local governments can try to work towards and help fund those for the future. So, but anyway, I guess my point being is that we support trying to stay within that collaborative approach.
I think you bring up too, I think one of the things you might find, like last year with Hurricane Helene, when it came in, we had a stormwater surge of like 5 feet, 6 feet. We haven't seen anything like that. Nothing like that's happened in over 100 years. And I will tell you, with all the pesticides, all the other stuff, the trash, whatever they get into the bay, we try to like minimize it. You wouldn't want to go in that water at that point in time either. So that could be part of it as well. So I think those things are something to look at as well. So good point. Any other thoughts, or you want to?
There's Tom McGill online has his hand.
Oh, okay, Tom.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I just wanted to make a general comment about EPA's appreciation of the value of the reasonable assurance framework and the leadership of the nitrogen management consortium. Ed referenced the federal TMDL, the TMDL that was established in 1998 and remains in effect for Clean Water Act purposes. As I believe everybody well understands, implementing TMDLs is very challenging, and nutrient TMDLs in particular. Across the nation, this is a very common challenge. But I do feel like the framework and through the leadership of the Nitrogen Management Consortium, that is a very effective path forward. And currently, cooperative federalism is among the pillars of EPA under this current administration. And I do feel like the leadership of the participating local governments and industries is an excellent example of cooperative federalism. So anyway, I just wanted to make those remarks. Thank you.
Tom, if I could, let me ask you a question. From what I've mentioned with that Part 2 money with the council from the BP settlement, is my approach, the comments I make, do you think they tie into what could be a source for funding?
I'm probably not the best person to give an accurate answer on that. I do think it's absolutely worth exploring. If I'm understanding the question correctly, potential restore funding from the Restore Council, and you're wondering if that could be part of the solution in terms of the challenge of addressing the nutrient loads?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think exploring that is absolutely worthwhile.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts, comments? Do you want to restate your motion or make a motion?
No, I'm not changing. I just want.
Well,
to
how-
make- I
say-
want
say it
everybody
again
to
so I understand
understand that
that.
we have no animosity or what we want to be collaborative part of this program. My concern is there will be ramifications if we move forward with the absolute numbers that we are seeing. So I was hoping that we can get this legal, somebody tell us legally or financially, what will the ramifications be if we are not going to be in compliance? And I think, I'm pretty sure we will not be in compliance. That's where I'm at with this thing. If everybody's moving forward and says, yes, we're in it, we're not gonna be out, but I just want to make sure everybody's clear that we will be in non-compliance moving forward if this decision memo moves forward.
I just want to be a steward of the process. So this is a discussion item, not an action item. And if you want to proceed differently, that's fine. I just want to be clear. What we're trying to do is gather feedback to report this information to the Tampa Bay Nitrogen Management Consortium, who is the ultimate decider about whether or not a decision memo is submitted. And so, Alex, I want to reaffirm that I have recorded your comments, I think very clearly, and we'll share them, diligently with the Nitrogen Management Consortium. Kelly, you're here, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot if you're able to offer any comment there, but it's my understanding that the whole decision-making process is a structured decision-making process that the Nitrogen Management Consortium has used for nearly 30 years. And the idea is that you submit a decision memo. A decision memo has no regulatory or legal weight. What it is a structured process to gather feedback. So we're trying to get consensus from the consortium members. So folks from your different entities that represent there, we submit those memos to both of the regulators, so the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. They either collaborate or separately respond to the proposal and provide the clarity that you're looking for. And then however we facilitate that through the process, there could be a series of decision memos. That's how it's happened in the past as we sort of work through some of these thorny issues. We go back and forth to find a path that there is consensus and support for. And ultimately it gets submitted to the department in a reasonable assurance addendum. That addendum is how the department would then act on whether or not it changes permit conditions or any sort of changes to the regulatory process. But we're sort of in this negotiated decision-making phase where we're trying to get those kinds of answers from the regulatory agencies. So even if Kelly, gave an excellent answer today, I don't know that that holds weight either. Having it in writing, I think it provides value and assurance to all of the partners. But I'm just trying to be a steward of the process for everyone and kind of understand the nuance of how the Nitrogen Management Consortium works.
And I think with federal government, state government, local government, I think everybody's goal is compliance. They want to see results. So I don't know if I want to spend time and money to go study what the ramifications are, because it may change politically anyway. Someone come in and maybe just say, we're going straight environmental, we're going to put a ton of money into it. So be it. I think with what we're looking at, and I think the respect of the estuary's got, if they're looking for just the solutions for right now, and we push it forward, if we don't make it, we have to reassess anyway. It's gonna come down to science. And I think what the Nitrogen Consortium looking at is gonna be a big boost to say, here's what I think works, and go, let the scientists tell you what's gonna go. And my input, I don't have the knowledge for the technical part of it, but I'm just looking at overall picture. What's the best way to get something done? And I think with your science, you can lead the way. I'll deal with the political stuff later, because all that can be changed and negotiated anyway. But if you think it helps to have a word to say, okay, it's gonna cost us 20, 30, $100 million or $1 billion. If we don't do it, then
I'm just saying it's putting us out of compliance as soon as this thing moves forward.
I would say for other folks on the Nitrogen Management Consortium who aren't in the room today, part of the concerns and trepidations, which you've also heard echoed from two of the folks who sit in those meetings as well, is they want to make sure that they are not putting you all as elected officials in a position where you have to appropriate funds that maybe are out of step with your priorities or what you have is available. So I think these concerns are important to voice, and then how you respond to them, from with respect to your role as, the decision makers and the funders of, these different priority kinds of projects that you all as local government partners pursue, that's useful information for them to know that you'll have their back or you share their reservations, that's important information for us to convey.
I think if they could just do it, I don't think we didn't need a motion, for it, but if they can put that as part of their arguments, why we need to go do this, that could be helpful.
I've recorded comments from the city of Tampa, from Hillsborough County and Pasco County. Is there any other feedback that you all would like us to convey to the consortium for any of you others sitting here?
Great document, thank you. And 11, additional packet information, Maya?
I won't belabor it. The reports are in there. If you ever want to dive deeper, feel free to reach out to me. Our August meeting is going to be on August 15th, and it will be a joint meeting of you all with the management board. We'll be talking about our strategic plan moving forward.
Next policy board meeting, as we say, is there. Is there anything else to come before the board? Any motion to adjourn?
You take one.
Move to adjourn?
Sure.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.